The Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland collapsing overnight, and search and rescue operations are still underway for some of the people who fell into the water. NTD's Luis Martinez joins us now live from the scene. Luis, what can you tell us about the situation at the Baltimore Harbor as we speak?
Good evening, Steve. Yes, the latest information we have was from a press conference about an hour ago where Governor Wes Moore was accompanied by Senator Ben Carr, Senator Ben Holland, even Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg made his way to the Baltimore Harbor. And all the authorities insisted in one thing, Steve, and it's that it's still a very search and rescue operation. The agency leading the investigation is the National Transportation Safety Board, but they've deferred to the Coast Guard and other first responders to focus on search and rescue before the investigation. But let's listen to what Jennifer Homendy, the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, had to say earlier today.
Part of our investigation will be how was this bridge constructed? It will look at the structure itself. Should there be any sort of safety improvements? All that will be part of our investigation. We go very broad in our investigation.
So, Steve, what we know so far is that around 1:30 in the morning, the Singaporean flagged container ship Dolly struck one of the support beams of the Francis Scott Key Bridge here in the Baltimore Harbor, causing it to collapse. The Dolly, the container ship, had lost propulsion minutes earlier. It had also issued a mayday call, a distress call, warning authorities that they had lost control. Authorities then diverted traffic away from the bridge and saving many lives. Let's listen to what the Governor Wes Moore had to say about this incident.
We can confirm that the crew notified authorities of a power issue. Yes.
And that they had lost power on the ship.
Yes.
So, Steve, this bridge was built in 1977. It was a 1.6-mile long bridge with 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. It was one of 3 main arteries crossing the Patapsco River into Baltimore City. The other 2 are tunnels. The Francis Scott Bridge, iconic for locals, is also very important for commuters coming into Baltimore. So, it's going to be a long time before communities can recollect from this disaster. It will obviously affect the Port of Baltimore and shipping coming in and out of this area.
Yeah, Luis, so as you mentioned, search and rescue efforts still very much underway. As we can see, the images still coming in, that the ship is still right where it was when the incident and accident occurred. So with that said, what can you tell us about the potential victims?
Yes, Steve, very interesting. Actually, the National Transportation Safety Board has not yet boarded the ship. The ship is still right there where it was when it hit the bridge, and the crew is still on board. As of now, authorities are talking about 8 people who fell into the water. 2 of them have been rescued by authorities. 1 remains in the hospital. The other man remains in contact with authorities. But it's 6 people that remain missing. 6 people, Steve, that belong to a construction crew that was working on fixing potholes on the bridge. The rescue efforts are, of course, still ongoing. Let's listen to what Fire Chief James Wallace had to say about these efforts.
We've been able to mark what they believe to be 3 passenger vehicles. They've also been able to mark a cement truck, and we believe we've marked a 5th vehicle. I don't know the nature of the vehicle, whether it's a passenger vehicle or work vehicle. This incident in and of itself really presented a potential for secondary collapse, right? There had already been a catastrophic collapse. There's still certain elements of the bridge that are up, as well as the bridge on the bow of the boat.
So, Steve, it's also very important to mention that the FBI and other government agencies have stressed that there is no information indicating terrorism, that this thus far does look to be an accident. Also, President Biden spoke earlier today promising federal funds and that he would request them from Congress in order to rebuild this bridge. Back to you, Steve.
NTD's Luis Martinez reporting for us live from Baltimore there. Luis, thank you. And following the bridge collapse, President Biden saying he wants to use federal funds to rebuild the collapsed structure. He said the administration is moving to act quickly given the impact the down bridge will ultimately cause to the region.
This is going to take some time. The people of Baltimore can count on us, though, to stick with them at every step of the way until the port is reopened and the bridge is rebuilt.
In remarks from the White House, the president said a search and rescue operation is currently the top priority. He added that he does expect Congress to support his intention to have the federal government pay for rebuilding the bridge. He also said he will visit that area as soon as he can, but thus far, no trip has been scheduled. The Supreme Court today reviewing a case about an abortion pill called mifepristone. The FDA is fighting to allow easier access to the pill, while conservative groups of doctors are pushing to reinstate tighter restrictions. We turn now to NTD's legal correspondent, Arleen Richards. Arleen, thank you so much for joining. What was the FDA's argument for why they relaxed the rules on access to the pill?
Well, in 2016 and 2021, they relaxed their restrictions on things like gestational age, number of doctor visits, and access to mail. Now, they argue that there is no increased risk of harm as a result of those changes, and that these doctors who brought the suit shouldn't be allowed to bring this claim. They say they don't even prescribe the abortion pill, nor do they give abortions. So the conservative doctors argue that there is a higher risk of harm because of the changes, and because of that, they may have to perform emergency abortions, even though it's against their beliefs. Now, Justice Amy Coney Barrett questioned the FDA's attorney on how the changes may impact adverse events. Let's listen.
As I understand it, the serious adverse consequences that have to be reported or that FDA considers risks are death and transfusion, but not say, I mean, it seems to me, and I think the data bears this out, that the elimination of the in-person dispensing requirement or, the in-person visit at the outset would lead to mistakes in gestational aging, which could increase the need for a DNC or the amount of bleeding, et cetera. But that does not count, correct, as an adverse event?
So I want to be careful because there's a list of serious adverse events, and I'm not sure that I have all of them down to be able to recite them to you, although they're in the record. But I do think the premise of the question is wrong, this idea that the change to in-person dispensing would necessarily increase the risk of those events. That was not reflected in the data that FDA consulted.
So, Arleen, if you could, we just heard there from Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. What are some of the other justices saying about their concerns? What exactly stood out to you?
Well, I think there's a serious concern about whether or not these doctors should be allowed to bring these claims. Now, the FDA argued that since these doctors don't prescribe the abortion pill and they don't perform abortions, there's no risk of harm to them. In particular, though, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wanted an explanation as to why the doctors couldn't just object to performing the abortions, which actually is allowed under federal law. The other concern for many of the justices is that if they allow these individual doctors to bring this claim, it may open a can of worms for other individuals to now think that they can also sue the FDA out of a concern that they may one day have to have a certain drug and that it might harm them. Now, the justices asked more challenging questions to the doctor's attorney, which seems to be a clear indication that they are skeptical about these doctors bringing this claim. Steve?
Arleen Richards, thank you for that. And a multi-day hearing began today in an ethics case against Jeffrey Clark, an assistant attorney general during the Trump administration who's facing possible disbarment, this for alleged actions that he took to investigate potential election fraud in the 2020 presidential election. The hearing is held by a committee of the D.C. Bar's Board on Professional Responsibility, the disciplinary arm of a D.C. appeals court. In December 2020, Clark tried to send a letter to Georgia officials saying that the DOJ had, quote, identified significant concerns about election results in that state. The committee in D.C. is now weighing whether Clark violated ethics rules by doing so. If the committee finds such a violation, Clark could be sanctioned or disbarred. In an opening statement, Clark's attorney said punishing Clark for simply making a policy recommendation is unprecedented. And Clark wrote on Truth Social on Monday that he's being targeted for being a Trump supporter who questioned the 2020 election. Clark is one of the 18 co-defendants in former President Trump's Georgia RICO case. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Bomb threats, tour buses vandalized, and U.S. citizens allegedly targeted with Chinese propaganda, all while entering the United States, all of which appears to be an escalating campaign by the Chinese Communist Party to interfere with New York-based Shen Yun Performing Arts. NTD's Jack Bradley has the details.
An American performing arts company received 3 bomb threats over the past week. The incidents target Shen Yun Performing Arts, based in New York. Now, the company has long been the target of the Chinese regime because of its portrayal of what China was like before communism. The first bomb threat against Shen Yun this month targeted the company's offices in New York. An email account with a Chinese name said they'd placed a remote control bomb and threatened to detonate it. Emails from accounts with Chinese names were also sent to theaters in California and Vancouver. They also threatened to detonate bombs if they didn't cancel upcoming Shen Yun performances. Theater staff evacuated, but bomb technicians and detection canines found nothing in both instances. Also, 2 of Shen Yun's tour buses had their tires slashed 2 weeks ago in Costa Mesa, California, a recurring incident for the company. Just as in previous instances, the tires were slashed in a way so as to burst when driven on the freeway. We broke a story earlier this month at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. A U.S. Customs officer whose last name is Ho, a Chinese immigrant from Beijing and is fluent in Mandarin, allegedly targeted the performers while they were re-entering the U.S. after touring in Europe. Officer Ho allegedly told the dancers that they were illegal because of their faith, even though they are U.S. citizens or hold legal visas. Officer Ho is still currently working at the O'Hare Airport. The Midwest Falun Dafa Association, which is the presenter of Shen Yun, is calling on U.S. Customs and Border Protection to investigate the incident. They said in a statement, "We are deeply troubled by the discrimination, and never did we anticipate that a federal government official, especially a customs officer, would delve into an individual's personal beliefs. Such conduct not only violates federal government policy, but also undermines the foundational principles of our nation, freedom of belief." A Customs and Border Protection Watch commander said that they're investigating the incident. Many of Shen Yun's artists have experienced persecution firsthand by the regime in China for practicing Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It's a meditation practice based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, and it's been banned and persecuted in China since 1999. A Shen Yun vice president said that these threats are the Chinese regime's last-ditch effort to hide the truth. Members of Congress like Congressman Scott Perry and Michelle Steele have sent letters to the Customs and Border Protection demanding answers. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.